Hey everyone, ready to explore one of life's biggest mysteries? We're diving deep into the why of sex. Why is it so common across the animal kingdom when it seems counterintuitive? I mean, finding a mate takes time and energy, and only half the population can actually have babies.
You're hitting on a question that's puzzled scientists for a really long time.
So, are we going to solve it today?
Well, we're going to try. At least we're going to unpack some of the most fascinating theories out there. And we've got a great guide for this journey, Matt Ridley's book, The Red Queen.
Awesome. Can't wait to get started.
Okay, so right off the bat, we need to debunk a common misconception. Earlier theories about evolution often assume that traits developed for the good of the species.
Yeah, like that classic image of a mama bird sacrificing herself to feed her chicks. It's heartwarming, but not very accurate, is it?
Exactly. It's not about what's best for the whole group. It's about individual survival and reproduction.
So, like survival of the fittest.
You got it. Think of it this way. Imagine two tigresses fighting over territory. Only one can win, right?
Yeah, a tiger fight, that's intense.
It is. And it illustrates the point perfectly. Only one survives. Good for her, but not so much for the species as a whole. The winner, though, gets to pass on her genes. And that's what really matters in evolution. George Williams, a really important figure in evolutionary biology, called this the idea of individual selection.
So how does all this relate to sex? If evolution favors efficiency, shouldn't asexual reproduction be more common? I mean, cloning yourself sounds way more efficient. Bam, twice as many offspring.
Right, you'd think so. And that's precisely why sex is such a puzzle. Finding a mate, all that courtship, it seems like a ton of effort for what? Half the reproductive output.
It's a real head scratcher.
It is. And brilliant minds like George Williams and Michael Gislin really brought this point to light. They challenged the traditional view of sex and kicked off this search for new explanations.
So who jumped into this scientific quest to understand sex? Who were the big players?
Well, you had different camps, each with their own perspectives and lingo. The molecular biologists were all about DNA.
Okay, right. Digging into the nitty-gritty of genes.
Yeah, then you had the geneticists tracking how traits were passed down through generations. And of course, the ecologists, they were looking at the big picture, how organisms interact with their environment.
Sounds like a recipe for some pretty intense debates.
Oh, you bet. So let's start with one of the early contenders for explaining the purpose of sex, DNA repair. Now think of DNA as a blueprint, right? But it's a blueprint that's constantly getting damaged.
Damaged. How so?
Just think of all the things that can go wrong. Radiation, chemicals, even errors during replication. So sex, specifically that recombination of genes from two parents, might be a way to repair that damage using the partner's healthy genes.
So it's like getting a software update for your DNA, patching up the glitches.
Exactly. It's a neat concept, right?
And it makes sense.
But there's a problem.
Yeah.
It doesn't fully explain why sexual organisms often outcompete asexual ones, especially in environments that are constantly changing. If it were just about fixing errors, asexual reproduction would be just as effective.
Okay, so what was the next theory to step into the ring?
Muller's ratchet. This one really highlights the problem of accumulating harmful mutations, particularly in asexual species.
So typos in the genetic cutover.
Basically, imagine a car that can only get dents and scratches, no repairs. Eventually, it's going to break down. That's what happens to asexual organisms. They inherit all the mutations from their parent, plus any new ones that pop up along the way. And over time, those harmful mutations pile up, leading to a decline in fitness.
They're stuck with a growing pile of genetic baggage.
Exactly. But with sex, it's like you've got a mechanic for the car. You get that beautiful reshuffling of genes during recombination. New combinations, healthier ones emerge. And some of those harmful mutations get ditched in the process.
That makes sense. So sex helps to prevent a genetic meltdown.
Right. But hold on, because there are these tiny little creatures called blittiloid rotifers.
Rotifers.
Yeah, microscopic animals. They're the ultimate asexual rebels. They seem to have thrived without sex for millions of years.
Millions of years.
Yeah.
Wow. So like the exception that proves the rule. Or maybe they've got some secret weapon that lets them avoid the whole mutation pileup.
Yeah, they're a fascinating anomaly. Studying them might help us understand where these theories fall short and uncover new mechanisms for maintaining genetic diversity.
All right, so we've got DNA repair, avoiding genetic meltdown, and now what?
Now for my personal favorite, the Red Queen hypothesis. Picture an evolutionary arms race, like hosts and parasites battling it out.
Okay, so like a microscopic battle scene, parasites launching attacks and the host desperately building defenses.
That's it. The Red Queen hypothesis suggests that sex provides the genetic variation that a host needs to stay ahead of those constantly evolving parasites. You got to keep changing to survive.
So it's a never-ending game of evolutionary catch-up.
You got it. And we have some really cool evidence to support this. Curtis Lively, he studied water snails in New Zealand. He found that the sexual snail populations were much more common in areas with higher parasite loads.
So like the parasites were driving the evolution of sex.
Exactly.
Okay, so DNA repair, avoiding genetic meltdown, and this epic battle against parasites. Is that all of them? Are those all the big contenders for explaining the purpose of sex?
Those are some of the big ones for sure. But there's another really intriguing layer to the Red Queen. It doesn't just explain why sex exists, but also helps to explain the evolution of beauty.
Hold on, how does a microscopic battle against parasites connect to something like a peacock's tail?
Well, think about it. Choosing a healthy mate is a way to make sure your offspring inherit good genes, parasite-resistant ones. So traits like bright colors could signal health and parasite resistance, leading females to prefer healthier, more vibrant males.
So those elaborate ornaments are like big neon signs advertising good genes.
Exactly. Take the red jungle fowl. Females prefer males with healthy combs. And you know what? Comb health is directly affected by parasites. So it's a way for the females to pick the best possible dad for their chicks.
Wow, that's pretty cool. But couldn't those signals be deceptive? What's stopping a male from faking it?
Great question. And that brings us to the whole debate about honesty versus deception in sexual signals. Some traits might be deceptive, evolving to manipulate mate choice, even if they don't really reflect true fitness.
Like false advertising, the evolutionary version.
Yeah, you could say that. Think about human fashion. Are we lying about our status with extensive clothes, just like some animals might be exaggerating their health with flashy displays?
This is really making me rethink things. We've gone from DNA repair to peacock's tails to human fashion, and it all started with this mystery of sex.
It's all connected, and we're just getting started. Next time, we're going to delve into how these evolutionary pressures might have shaped human mating systems, and even the differences between male and female minds.
Now that's something I don't want to miss. Can't wait to continue this deep dive. So we've talked about all these evolutionary reasons behind sex, but how did these forces shape human mating systems?
Okay, well, that's where things get even more interesting. Looking back at human history, polygamy keeps popping up. You know, where one person has multiple partners?
Right, polygamy. It makes me wonder why that was so common.
Well, it comes down to a basic difference between men and women, their reproductive potential.
Meaning?
Well, a man, theoretically, can father a lot more children than a woman can bear, even in, like, perfect conditions.
Oh, right, right. A man could have, what, hundreds of kids? A woman is limited by pregnancy and, actually taking care of the kids.
Yeah, exactly. That's a huge difference. And that difference, that asymmetry, leads to different mating strategies evolving. Polygamy, though, it might be advantageous for some individuals, but it's probably not the ideal or even the most common human mating system.
So if men could benefit from multiple partners, why is monogamy one partner at a time so prevalent, especially now?
Well, it seems like female choice played a big role.
So women were basically like, we'd rather have a partner who's devoted to us and our kids.
You could say that. It makes sense when you think about the advantages: protection, resources, a stable environment for raising children.
Right? Especially back in those early hunter-gatherer days. But hold on, does that mean women were totally against any kind of relationships outside their main partnership?
Well, it's not quite that black and white. There's a concept called the Emma Bovary strategy. It's a bit provocative, but stick with me.
Okay, Emma Bovary, go on.
Basically, it suggests that women might benefit from, let's say, extra pair relationships to maybe get those superior genes for their offspring while still having the stability of a committed partner.
Oh, so it's like hedging your bets, genetically speaking. While keeping that secure base, it's a pretty complex dynamic.
Very much so. And of course, we're talking about subconscious motivations here, shaped by evolution over a really long time. It's not about conscious choices or, making moral judgments. It's about understanding these deep-seated drives that shape behavior.
Right. We're not judging, just trying to understand. So we've explored mating systems, but what about differences between, male and female minds? This is tricky territory, but what does evolutionary psychology have to say about it?
It's definitely an area that we need to approach carefully. I think the main thing to keep in mind is that differences, they don't equal superiority. We're just talking about variations that develop because of different environmental and social pressures.
Right, of course. No one's saying one sex is better, just that they might have, different strengths.
Exactly. And Research has found some pretty consistent differences. For example, on average, girls tend to be better at verbal tasks, while boys, on average, tend to have an edge in spatial reasoning, like those mental rotation tests.
Huh, that makes me think of my own family. I was always a total bookworm, but my brother, he was a math whiz. Could that be like an evolutionary thing?
It's possible. One prominent theory connects those differences to the roles men and women often played way back when, like in those hunter-gatherer societies. Men, the hunters, they would needed those spatial skills for navigating, tracking prey, things like that. And women, the gatherers, maybe they relied more on communication and social intelligence, for building relationships and sharing knowledge.
That's interesting. So what about aggression? Isn't there a lot of research showing that men are generally more aggressive?
Yes, and it might also be related to those ancient roles. Men often competed for resources and mates. So more aggressive tendencies, well, those might have been favored in those situations.
So just physical aggression? Or does it include other types too, like verbal aggression or even like social manipulation?
Aggression takes many forms, and there's this theory called the Machiavellian intelligence hypothesis, which basically suggests that human intelligence, it evolved, at least in part, for social manipulation and outsmarting rivals.
Wow. So it's like our brains evolved to be good at social chess, constantly trying to outmaneuver each other.
It's a fascinating idea for sure, but we have to remember that a lot of animals have pretty complex social behaviors, and they don't have human-level intelligence. Take chimps, for example. They can be incredibly cunning.
True. They can be sneaky. But they're not exactly writing philosophy books or, having big debates about politics. So the Machiavellian idea is interesting, but it doesn't fully explain the whole scope of human intelligence.
You're right. It seems like there's got to be more to this story. And this brings us to one of the most mind-blowing ideas in evolutionary psychology. What if the human brain, with all its potential for creativity, actually evolved as a sexually selected ornament?
Wait, are you saying that our brains are like giant peacock's tails? We evolved to be intelligent because it made us more attractive?
That's the theory. Sounds crazy, right? But think about it. Intelligence and creativity, they're highly valued when people choose their mates, even though they don't seem directly related to survival skills.
It's true. People are drawn to intelligence. I never thought about it that way. So you're suggesting that runaway sexual selection, that same force that drives those extravagant ornaments in animals, it could have also fueled the growth of the human brain.
Exactly. And that could explain why we see this explosion of art, music, language, and complex thought in humans. It's like our brains became this ultimate way to show off our fitness. To potential mates, I mean.
Okay, my mind is officially blown. Does that mean we're still evolving? Is the Red Queen still shaping our brains and how we behave in response to new challenges?
That's a question that keeps evolutionary biologists up at night. We definitely know that evolution is ongoing, but the pressures that shape it are constantly changing.
So what could those forces be today? What's shaping human evolution now? Is it still about, attracting mates? Or are there other things at play?
Well, think about it. Climate change, resource scarcity, pandemics, technology changing so rapidly. These are all massive pressures that could be influencing how we evolve.
It's like the Red Queen is playing out on a global scale now. We're not just competing with each other, but with these huge environmental and technological forces, too.
That's a powerful way to think about it. And it's impossible to say for sure what will happen. But understanding these basic principles of evolution, especially the roles of sex and sexual selection, they give us a framework for understanding our place in all of this, in the grand scheme of things.
This deep dive has really changed how I see things. It's kind of humbling to realize we're not just rational beings. We're connected to our evolutionary past in ways we might not even realize, driven by these forces that we're not even aware of.
And that connection, that's what makes us so fascinating. We're products of this incredible process, evolution. It's complex, messy, shaped by things like sex, parasites. It's a constant back and forth between cooperation and competition.
I feel like we've only just scratched the surface. There's so much more to learn.
Absolutely. And that's what's so great about science. It's this never-ending quest for understanding. Every answer just leads to more questions, and every discovery opens up new paths to explore, new mysteries to uncover.
Well, on that note, maybe it's time for us to come up for air. But I have a feeling we're going to be thinking about these ideas a lot.
I agree. The Red Queen, she's always there, pushing us to keep running, to keep evolving, to keep exploring these mysteries of life.
Thanks for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep those questions coming. It's pretty amazing to think that our brains, I mean, with their capacity for language and art and all this complex thought, that they might have evolved as what, like a sexual display.
I know, it really challenges how we usually think about intelligence.
Totally. We think of it as this practical tool, for survival. But what if it's also this flashy signal, like you said, like a peacock's tail, to show off how genetically fit we are to potential mates?
It really makes you wonder, like if the human mind evolved partly through that lens of sexual selection, what does it say about our pursuit of knowledge, beauty, even meaning?
It's such a huge question. Are we driven by this like deep down desire to impress and attract, even in our intellectual pursuits?
It is a big question.
Yeah.
It makes you rethink why humans have accomplished so much. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I see what you mean. And it also makes me think about the future of human evolution. Is the Red Queen still working, shaping our brains and behaviors in response to all these new challenges?
Well, the Red Queen never sleeps. And as we deal with new pressures, things like climate change and all these technological advancements, pandemics, our species is going to have to adapt. The question is how.
So, what could the human of the future look like? Will our brains keep getting bigger and more complex? Will we develop new abilities we can't even imagine right now?
That's the thing about evolution. You can't predict it. But we can look back, right? And throughout history, we've seen some remarkable adaptations, in response to environmental and social pressures. It seems likely that this will keep going, maybe even speed up as the world changes faster and faster.
This deep dive has really been eye-opening. It's humbling to think that we're not just these rational, independent beings, but we're so connected to our evolutionary past, driven by these forces we might not even realize.
And that connection, that's what makes us so fascinating. We're the product of this long process, evolution, incredible and complex and, yeah, messy too. Shaped by all these things, sex, parasites, this constant push and pull between cooperation and competition.
It really feels like we've only just scratched the surface.
There's always more to learn, and that's what's so cool about science, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's this never-ending search for understanding. With every answer, we get more questions, and every discovery opens up new paths to explore, new mysteries to unravel.
Well, I think it's time for us to wrap up this deep dive, but I know I'm going to be thinking about these ideas for a long time.
I think we all will.
Yeah.
Remember, keep asking those questions, keep challenging what you think you know, and never stop exploring the world around you. You never know what incredible discoveries are out there waiting to be found.
Thanks to all of you for joining us on this incredible journey. Until next time, keep those minds curious and keep those questions coming.